The stagecoach wheels churned up dust devils as Magnolia Thorne pressed her forehead against the window, watching the rocky terrain of Idaho Territory roll past like a landscape of broken promises. She had learned not to hope anymore, but her heart refused to listen, beating its foolish rhythm against her ribs as Ruby City came into view through the haze of August heat in 1878. The mining town sprawled across the Awahi Mountains like a collection of weathered bones, buildings clustered together as if seeking warmth from each other in this harsh landscape. Magnolia adjusted the collar of her gray traveling dress, the fabric already stiff with dust and sweat, and reminded herself that this time would be no different from all the others. She was damaged goods, a woman with a past that followed her like a shadow at noon, impossible to outrun or hide. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the Ruby City Hotel, a two-story structure that had seen better days but stood proud nonetheless. Magnolia gathered her single carpet bag, the sum total of her worldly possessions, and stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk. The driver barely glanced at her as he tossed her bag at her feet and climbed back onto his perch, already preparing to move on to the next destination. She stood there in the afternoon sun, feeling the weight of curious stares from the townspeople who had paused in their daily activities to assess the newcomer. A woman alone, arriving without escort or family, was always cause for speculation in these small western towns. Magnolia had endured these stares before, in Carson City, in Silver Peak, in a dozen other places that had eventually turned their backs on her once they learned the truth. She had been married once, briefly, to a man who drank more than he worked and used his fists more than his words. When she had finally gathered the courage to leave him, taking nothing but the clothes on her back and her grandmother's silver locket, the world had not celebrated her bravery. Instead, it had branded her with scarlet letters she could not see but everyone else could. Abandoned wife, failed woman, troublemaker. The marriage had been annulled after her husband was killed in a drunken brawl in Sacramento, but the stain remained. No respectable family wanted to associate with her. No church would welcome her into their congregation without pointed sermons about wifely duty and submission. She had worked as a seamstress, a laundress, a cook, moving from town to town whenever the whispers grew too loud and the opportunities too scarce. Ruby City was supposed to be different, but Magnolia knew better than to believe in fresh starts. She had answered an advertisement for a housekeeper at one of the larger ranches outside of town, the Everhart spread, and the response had been cautiously positive. She suspected they were desperate for help, desperate enough to overlook whatever rumors might eventually reach them. She would take what she could get, work hard, save her wages, and move on when the inevitable happened. The ranch was 5 miles outside of town, and she had been instructed to wait at the hotel for someone to collect her. Magnolia picked up her bag and pushed through the hotel doors, grateful for the shade if nothing else. The lobby was small but clean, with a desk manned by a thin woman with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting that helping was the last thing she wanted to do. "I am waiting for someone from the Everhart Ranch," Magnolia said, keeping her voice steady and polite. "They are expecting me. I am the new housekeeper." The woman's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been approval or might have been surprise. "Everhart Ranch, is it? Well, you will be working for good people then. Zachary Everhart runs that place, him and his brother. Hard workers, both of them. Fair employers, too, from what I hear." Magnolia felt a small flutter of something she refused to identify as hope. "I am pleased to hear it. You can wait in the parlor there." The woman gestured to a small sitting area near the window. "Would you like some water?" You look like you have been traveling hard." "Yes, thank you," Magnolia said, surprised by the offer of kindness. She settled into a worn armchair and accepted the tin cup of water gratefully, sipping it slowly as she watched the street outside. Ruby City was busier than she had expected, with miners and merchants moving about their business, freight wagons rumbling past, and the occasional rider kicking up dust as they galloped through town. It had the rough energy of all mining towns, but there was something else here too, something she could not quite name. A sense of community, perhaps, or simply the shared determination of people trying to carve a life out of unforgiving land. She did not have to wait long. Within half an hour, she heard the sound of a wagon pulling up outside, and then heavy boots on the boardwalk. The door opened, and a man stepped inside, removing his hat as he did so. Magnolia looked up and felt her breath catch in a way that had nothing to do with the heat or the dust or the long journey. The man was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway and a lean, muscular build that spoke of hard physical labor. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and fell past his collar in waves that needed a trim. But it was his face that arrested her attention. Strong-jawed and tanned from years in the sun, with high cheekbones and a straight nose that had been broken at least once. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, a gray so light they were almost silver, and they held an intelligence and warmth that surprised her. He was perhaps 30 years old, she guessed, maybe a year or two older, and he moved with the confident grace of a man comfortable in his own skin. He wore simple work clothes, denim trousers and a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, and his boots were scuffed and worn from honest use. "Miss Thorne?" he asked, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "Yes," she managed, standing up and smoothing her skirt with suddenly nervous hands. "You are from the Everhart Ranch." "I am Zachary Everhart," he said, stepping forward and extending his hand. "I own the ranch along with my brother Jacob. Welcome to Ruby City." She hesitated only a moment before taking his hand, expecting the brief, impersonal shake that was standard in business dealings. Instead, his grip was warm and firm, and he held her hand just a moment longer than necessary, his gray eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Thank you for coming to collect me," she said, withdrawing her hand and clasping both of hers together to stop them from trembling. "I appreciate your promptness. It is a long ride out to the ranch, and I wanted to get you settled before dark," Zachary said, glancing at the window where the sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains. "Do you have much luggage?" "Just this." Magnolia gestured to her single carpet bag, feeling a flush of embarrassment at how little she owned. If Zachary noticed or judged, he gave no sign. He simply picked up the bag as if it weighed nothing and gestured toward the door. "The wagon is just outside. It is not the most comfortable ride, but the ranch is worth it once you get there." Magnolia followed him outside, acutely aware of the curious stares from the townspeople. A proper woman would have insisted on a chaperone, but she was past the point of worrying about such niceties. She had learned that propriety was a luxury afforded only to those who had never made mistakes, never deviated from the narrow path society had laid out for them. Zachary helped her up onto the wagon seat with a hand that was gentlemanly but not presumptuous, then climbed up beside her and gathered the reins. The horses, a matched pair of sturdy bays, responded immediately to his command, pulling the wagon into motion with practiced ease. They rode in silence for the first few minutes, leaving the town behind and entering the open country. The landscape was beautiful in its harsh way, all rocky outcroppings and scrub vegetation with the mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. The air smelled of sage and dust and something else, something wild and untamed that Magnolia could not name but found strangely appealing. "I should tell you about the ranch," Zachary said finally, breaking the silence. "It is not what you would call fancy, but it is home. We run about 500 head of cattle, some horses, and we are trying to expand the operation. My brother Jacob handles most of the livestock management, and I take care of the business side of things and the general maintenance. We have 4 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, and there is a main house where Jacob and I live. That is where you will be working, keeping the house in order, cooking meals, that sort of thing." "I understand," Magnolia said. "I have experience with all of those duties." Zachary glanced at her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or concern. "The advertisement mentioned you were coming from Nevada. What brings you to Idaho Territory?" Here it was, the question she had been dreading. She could lie, spin some pleasant fiction about seeking adventure or wanting a change of scenery. But lies had a way of unraveling, and she was tired of running from the truth. "I needed a fresh start," she said carefully, keeping her eyes on the horizon. "My previous situations did not work out as I had hoped." She waited for the follow-up questions, the prying into her past that would inevitably lead to judgment and rejection. But Zachary simply nodded, as if her answer was perfectly reasonable and required no further explanation. "Well, you have found the right place for a fresh start," he said. "Ruby City might be small, but folks here tend to judge you by what you do, not where you came from. We have all come from somewhere else, running from something or running toward something. It does not matter much which, as long as you are willing to work hard and deal honestly with people." Magnolia turned to look at him, trying to detect any hint of mockery or false comfort in his expression. But his face was open and sincere, and she felt something shift in her chest, a tiny crack in the armor she had built around her heart. "I hope you are right," she said quietly. "I know I am," Zachary replied with a confidence that was not arrogant but simply stated as fact. "My brother and I, we came out here 6 years ago with nothing but a dream and our savings from working railroad construction. Nobody cared that our father had drunk himself to death, or that our mother had abandoned us when we were boys. They cared that we were willing to work harder than anyone else, that we kept our word, and that we treated people fairly. That is what matters out here." There was a story in those few sentences, a history of pain and perseverance that resonated with Magnolia's own experiences. She found herself wanting to know more, to understand this man who spoke of hardship without bitterness and of acceptance without conditions. "That must have been difficult," she ventured, "building all of this from nothing." Zachary's expression softened, and he smiled, a genuine warmth that transformed his already handsome face into something approaching beautiful. "It was the best thing we ever did. Hard work never killed anyone, and seeing something grow from your own sweat and determination, that is a satisfaction you cannot buy with money." They continued to talk as the wagon rolled along the rutted road, and Magnolia found herself relaxing in a way she had not allowed herself to do in years. Zachary asked her about her journey, about her impressions of the territory, about her experience with horses and cattle, since the ranch hands would sometimes need feeding at odd hours. He did not pry into her personal life, did not ask about her family or her past employment in ways that would require uncomfortable explanations. Instead, he told her about the ranch, about the challenges of the upcoming winter and the plans they had for expanding the herd in the spring. He spoke about his brother Jacob with obvious affection, describing him as more temperamental but fiercely loyal. A man who understood animals better than people, but who had a heart of gold beneath his rough exterior. The sun was hanging low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, when they finally turned off the main road onto a narrower track that led between two large boulders. "Nearly there," Zachary said, and Magnolia detected a note of pride in his voice. They crested a small rise, and the ranch spread out before them in the valley below. The main house was larger than she had expected, a sturdy two-story structure built from logs and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. Behind it stood a barn, a bunkhouse, several corrals, and various outbuildings, all well maintained and arranged with an eye toward practicality. She could see cattle grazing in the distance, and closer in, horses moved about in a large paddock, their coats gleaming in the golden light. "It is beautiful," Magnolia said, and she meant it. There was something solid and permanent about the place, a sense of roots going deep into the earth. "Thank you," Zachary said simply, and she could hear the pleasure in his voice. "We have put everything we have into making it work." As they approached the main house, a man emerged from the barn and strode toward them. He was slightly shorter than Zachary but built along the same powerful lines, with the same dark hair though his was shorter and more neatly trimmed. His face was harder, more closed off, and he watched Magnolia with open suspicion as Zachary brought the wagon to a stop. "Jacob, this is Miss Magnolia Thorne, our new housekeeper," Zachary said, jumping down from the wagon and coming around to help Magnolia descend. "Miss Thorne, my brother Jacob Everhart." Jacob nodded curtly, his gray eyes so similar to his brother's but lacking the warmth. "Miss Thorne, Mr. Everhart," Magnolia replied, meeting his gaze steadily. She had dealt with suspicious men before and had learned that showing fear or uncertainty only made things worse. "I will show Miss Thorne to her room and give her a tour of the house," Zachary said, picking up her bag. "Can you let the men know we will have supper in about 2 hours?" Jacob grunted what might have been agreement and turned back toward the barn, his posture radiating disapproval. Magnolia felt her heart sink a little. She had known it was too good to be true, this sense of welcome and acceptance. Jacob clearly did not want her here, and she suspected it would not be long before he convinced his brother to send her away. "Do not mind him," Zachary said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "Jacob is slow to trust, but once you earn it, he is the most loyal friend you could ask for. He has been burned before by people he trusted, and it made him cautious." "I understand," Magnolia said, though her heart felt heavy. Zachary led her up the porch steps and through the front door into a spacious main room that served as both parlor and dining area. The furniture was simple but well made, masculine in its lack of decoration but comfortable looking. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, and she could see doorways leading off to what must be the kitchen and other rooms. "Kitchen is through there," Zachary gestured to the left. "It is well stocked, and we get supplies from town every 2 weeks. There is a root cellar out back for storage, and we keep chickens for eggs. The hands usually eat in the bunkhouse, but Jacob and I take our meals here, and sometimes the men join us for Sunday dinner." He led her up a narrow staircase to the second floor, which had 4 bedrooms and a small washroom. "Jacob and I have the 2 rooms at the front of the house," he explained. "This room here will be yours, and the 4th room is for storage right now, but you are welcome to use it however you see fit." The bedroom he showed her was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the valley. It was more than she had expected, certainly more than she deserved given the wages they had offered in the advertisement. "It is perfect," she said, setting her bag on the bed. "Thank you." Zachary lingered in the doorway, his expression thoughtful. "Miss Thorne, I want you to understand something. Whatever brought you here, whatever you are running from or trying to escape, it does not matter to me or to Jacob once he gets to know you. We need help, and you need work. That is the beginning and the end of it as far as I am concerned. You will be judged here by your actions, not your history." Magnolia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. She had not cried in 3 years, not since the day she had walked away from her husband with blood still drying on her split lip, and she would not start now. But the kindness in Zachary's words, the simple acceptance, was almost more than she could bear. "You do not know anything about me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You might change your mind when you do." Zachary leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his chest. "Let me tell you what I know. I know you answered an advertisement for a job that is hard work and low pay in the middle of nowhere. I know you traveled alone across rough country to get here, which takes courage. I know you looked me in the eye when we met, which tells me you have nothing to be ashamed of, even if others have tried to make you feel that way. And I know you are standing here right now, trying to warn me away from you because you think you are going to be rejected again. That tells me you are honest, maybe too honest for your own good." He pushed away from the doorframe and met her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You have finally found acceptance here, Miss Thorne. I hope you will stay long enough to believe that." Before she could respond, before she could process the impact of his words, he was gone, his boots echoing on the stairs as he descended to the main floor. Magnolia sank down onto the bed, her legs suddenly weak, and pressed her hands to her face. She had arrived expecting rejection again, as she always did. But Zachary Everhart had looked at her, really looked at her, and had offered her something she had not felt in years: hope. The next morning came early, with the pale light of dawn filtering through her window and the sound of roosters crowing in the yard. Magnolia dressed quickly in her work clothes, a simple brown dress with an apron, and braided her long auburn hair into a practical plait that hung down her back. She studied herself briefly in the small mirror above the dresser, noting the dark circles under her green eyes and the thinness of her face. She needed to eat more, she knew, but money had been tight and meals had often been sparse. She made her way downstairs to find the kitchen already occupied. Zachary stood at the stove, attempting to make coffee, and from the smell, he was not having much success. He looked up as she entered, and a rueful smile crossed his face. "I am a rancher, not a cook," he said by way of greeting. "I can brand a calf, fix a fence, break a horse, but apparently I cannot make a decent pot of coffee to save my life." Magnolia could not help but smile at his honest admission. "Let me," she said, moving to take over at the stove. "You go do whatever it is ranchers do at this hour, and I will have breakfast ready within the hour." Zachary looked relieved. "You are already earning your wages. Jacob and the hands usually come in around 6, and they will eat just about anything as long as there is plenty of it." He left her to explore the kitchen, which was surprisingly well equipped. Someone had clearly put thought and money into making it functional, with a large wood-burning stove, ample counter space, and shelves stocked with staples. She found flour, salt, sugar, dried beans, cornmeal, bacon, eggs from the henhouse outside, and even a jar of sourdough starter that looked like it had been well maintained. Magnolia set to work with the ease of long practice, building up the fire in the stove, putting on a proper pot of coffee, and beginning to mix biscuit dough. She sliced bacon and set it to frying, scrambled 24 eggs, and had the biscuits in the oven by the time she heard boots on the porch. Jacob came in first, followed by 4 ranch hands who looked tired but curious. They all stopped short when they saw her at the stove, and she felt their eyes assessing her with the directness common to men who spent their days working in harsh conditions. "Morning," she said, keeping her voice friendly but professional. "Breakfast will be ready in just a few minutes. Please sit." They settled around the long table and Zachary came in last, taking a seat at the head. Magnolia poured coffee for all of them, noting with satisfaction the appreciative noises they made after the first sip, then brought over platters of bacon, eggs, and the hot biscuits fresh from the oven. For several minutes, there was no sound except the clatter of forks on plates and the occasional request to pass the butter or jam. Magnolia served herself a small portion and sat at the far end of the table, eating quietly and watching the men from beneath lowered lashes. "Miss Thorne, this is the best meal we have had in 6 months," one of the ranch hands finally said, a young man with red hair and freckles. "I am Danny, and I speak for all of us when I say we are mighty glad you are here." The other men nodded in agreement, even Jacob, though his nod was barely perceptible. Zachary caught her eye across the table and smiled, a warm, approving smile that made her feel something flutter in her chest. "I am glad it meets with your approval," she said. "What time would you like lunch, and will everyone be here for it?" "We usually eat around noon," Zachary said. "The hands will take their lunch out with them today since we are working the far pasture, but Jacob and I will be here. And dinner, 6 o'clock, all of us together." Magnolia nodded, already planning the meals in her head. With this many men to feed, she would need to bake bread, prepare substantial midday meals that could be packed and carried, and make hearty dinners that would satisfy men who had worked hard all day. It was a challenge, but it was one she welcomed. Hard work had always been her refuge, the thing that kept her mind occupied and her hands busy. The men finished eating and filed out, each one thanking her politely as they left. Jacob paused at the door, turned back as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it and left without a word. Zachary lingered, helping her clear the table despite her protests. "You do not need to do that," she said. "This is my job." "And helping where I can is just being decent," he replied, carrying a stack of plates to the wash basin. "Besides, I wanted to tell you that you have already exceeded our expectations. That was the best breakfast we have had since we hired the last housekeeper, and she stayed less than a month before deciding ranch life was not for her." "Why did she leave?" Magnolia asked, curious despite herself. Zachary shrugged, leaning against the counter and watching her as she began to wash the dishes. "She said it was too isolated, too much work, and that Jacob made her nervous with his silence and his staring. I think mostly she was hoping for something that was not here." What was she hoping for? Romance, maybe. Adventure. I think she read too many dime novels about the West and expected something more exciting than cooking and cleaning for a bunch of cowboys who spend their days covered in dust and cattle manure. Magnolia laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her. "I can assure you I have no such expectations. I am here to work, nothing more." Zachary's expression grew serious, and he studied her with those storm-gray eyes that seemed to see too much. "Everyone deserves more than just work, Miss Thorne. Everyone deserves to have a life, to be happy, to find a place where they belong." She turned back to the dishes, her throat tight with emotion. "Happiness is for other people. I am content with survival. That is a sad way to live. It is a realistic way to live." Zachary sighed, pushed away from the counter, and headed toward the door. He paused there, his hand on the frame, and looked back at her. "Maybe you have been living with the wrong people then. Because out here, we believe that everyone gets to define what their life looks like, as long as they are willing to work for it." He left before she could respond, and Magnolia stood at the wash basin, her hands submerged in soapy water, and wondered if it was possible that he was right. Could this place, this harsh and beautiful corner of Idaho Territory, be somewhere she could finally stop running? Could these men, with their direct gazes and honest talk, be people who would not judge her for her past? The days fell into a rhythm that was both demanding and strangely comforting. Magnolia rose before dawn to start breakfast, packed lunches for the men, cleaned the house, prepared dinner, and fell into bed exhausted each night. The work was hard, but it was honest work, and she found satisfaction in maintaining the household, in keeping the kitchen well organized and the meals nutritious and plentiful. Zachary was often around the house, coming in for meals or to work on the ranch accounts at the desk in the parlor. He had a habit of talking to her while she worked, not in a way that demanded her full attention, but in the easy manner of someone who enjoyed companionship. He told her stories about the ranch, about the various mishaps and adventures that had befallen him and Jacob over the years, about the personalities of the different cattle and horses, about his dreams for expanding the operation. Magnolia found herself looking forward to these conversations, to the sound of his deep voice and the warmth of his laughter. He had a way of making her feel included, as if her opinions and thoughts mattered, and she gradually began to relax her guard around him. Jacob was a different matter. He remained distant and watchful, speaking to her only when necessary and spending most of his time out with the cattle. But Magnolia noticed small things that suggested he was not as disapproving as he seemed. He always thanked her for meals. He left wildflowers on the kitchen table one morning without explanation. And once, when she had been struggling to carry a heavy pot of water from the well, he had appeared as if from nowhere, taken it from her hands without a word, and carried it inside for her. "He is warming up to you," Zachary said one evening about 3 weeks after her arrival. They were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The other men had retreated to the bunkhouse, and Jacob was out checking on a pregnant mare. "You think so?" Magnolia asked, surprised. "I know so. Jacob does not do things for people he does not respect. The flowers, the help with chores, those are his way of saying you belong here." Magnolia felt a warmth spread through her chest at the words, "you belong here." She had never belonged anywhere, not really. Her childhood home had been a place of constant criticism from a mother who had expected perfection. Her marriage had been a prison. Every job she had taken afterward had been temporary, a way station on a journey with no clear destination. "I appreciate his acceptance," she said softly. Zachary turned to look at her, and in the fading light his eyes seemed to glow. "It is not just Jacob. We all think you belong here, Magnolia." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a shiver through her despite the warm evening air. She met his gaze and saw something there that made her heart race: interest, attraction, and something deeper that she was afraid to name. "Zachary," she began, then faltered, not knowing what to say. "I know this is not the time or place," he said, his voice low and rough. "I know you have been here less than a month, and I am your employer, and there are 1,000 reasons why I should not say what I am about to say. But I have never been good at keeping my thoughts to myself, especially when those thoughts involve a beautiful woman who has turned my well-ordered life upside down." Magnolia's breath caught. "I do not understand." "I think you do," Zachary said gently. "I think you feel it too, this thing between us. I catch you watching me sometimes when you think I am not looking. I see the way you smile when I come into a room. And I absolutely know that when I look at you, I cannot hide what I am feeling." "You should not feel anything for me," Magnolia said, her voice shaking. "You do not know what I have done, where I have been." "Then tell me," Zachary challenged. Tell me this terrible secret that you think will make me turn away from you." The moment stretched between them, taut as a rope under strain. Magnolia had never told anyone the full story, had never trusted anyone enough to reveal the depths of her shame and fear. But something about Zachary's steady gaze, his open expression, gave her the courage to speak. "I was married," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "when I was 19 years old, to a man named Robert Thorne. He was charming when he courted me, attentive and kind, or so I thought. My mother encouraged the match because he had prospects, a job with a freight company, and seemed respectable." She paused, gathering her courage to continue. "The truth revealed itself on our wedding night. He was a drunk and a violent one. The kindness had been an act, a mask he wore to secure a wife. Once the vows were spoken, the mask came off." Zachary's hands clenched into fists on his thighs, but he said nothing, letting her continue at her own pace. "For 2 years I endured it. I tried to be a good wife, tried to do everything right, but nothing was ever enough. If dinner was not ready when he came home, he hit me. If I spoke out of turn, he hit me. If he had simply had a bad day, he hit me. I learned to be invisible, to anticipate his moods, to make myself small and quiet and unobtrusive." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to go on. "One night he came home drunker than usual. He had lost his job, and somehow that was my fault. He started hitting me, and I just knew that this time he would not stop. So I fought back. I grabbed a lamp and hit him with it, and while he was stunned, I ran. I took nothing but the clothes on my back and my grandmother's locket, and I ran into the night." "Good," Zachary said fiercely. "You should have done more than hit him with a lamp." Magnolia looked at him in surprise. She had expected disgust, condemnation, perhaps anger at her for abandoning her marriage vows. Instead, she saw fury in his eyes, but it was directed at her long-absent husband, not at her. "I left Sacramento and made my way to Carson City," she continued. "I found work as a seamstress and tried to build a new life. But word travels in the West, and eventually, people learned that I was a married woman living alone. The whispers started. I was called immoral, wanton, a woman of loose character. When my husband was killed in a fight 6 months later, some people actually said I should have stayed and honored my vows, even if it meant dying at his hands." She laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. "The marriage was annulled after his death, but the stain remained. I have been moving from town to town ever since, working until the whispers start and then moving on before I can be driven out. I am damaged goods, Zachary. I am a woman with a reputation that will follow me wherever I go." Zachary was silent for a long moment, and Magnolia felt her heart sink. She had been right to fear this moment, right to expect rejection. He would ask her to leave, politely perhaps, but firmly, and she would pack her single bag and move on to the next town, the next job, the next inevitable failure. Then Zachary stood, crossed the porch in 2 long strides, and knelt in front of her chair so that they were eye to eye. He took her hands in his grip warm and strong, and looked at her with an intensity that took her breath away. "Listen to me, Magnolia Thorne, and listen well. You are not damaged. You are not shameful. You are not any of the things that small-minded people have called you. You are a survivor. You are brave. You had the courage to escape a dangerous situation, to rebuild your life over and over again despite being knocked down each time, to keep going when most people would have given up." His thumbs rubbed gentle circles on the backs of her hands, and she felt tears spill down her cheeks unchecked. "You have finally found acceptance here. Do you understand what I am saying? Here, on this ranch in this town with me and Jacob and the men, you do not have to run anymore. You do not have to hide. You can just be Magnolia, The woman who makes the best biscuits in Idaho Territory and who laughs at my terrible jokes and who looks beautiful even when she is covered in flour from a day of baking." "You cannot mean that," Magnolia whispered. "I have never meant anything more in my life," Zachary said. He released one of her hands to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palm. "I am falling in love with you, Magnolia. I know it is too soon. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I cannot help it. When I look at you, I see my future. I see a partner, a companion, someone who understands what it means to fight for what you want and to never give up." Magnolia felt as if her heart might burst from her chest. "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I have been trying not to, trying to protect myself from another disappointment, but I cannot help it either. You are kind and strong and good, and you make me feel like I matter." Zachary smiled, that beautiful transformative smile that lit up his entire face. "You do matter. You matter to me, to this ranch, to everyone here. And if you will let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Magnolia did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the promise of a future that did not involve running and hiding and living in fear. When his lips met hers, it was like coming home after a long journey, like finding water in the desert, like every good thing she had ever dreamed of but never believed she could have. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, an exploration. Then Zachary's hand slid into her hair, loosening the braid, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of passion and promise. Magnolia wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing closer, wanting to erase the space between them, wanting to prove to herself that this was real, that he was real, that this acceptance and love were not just another dream that would dissolve in the harsh light of morning. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I know we need to take this slowly," he said. "I know you need time to heal, to trust, to believe that this is real, but I want you to know that I am not going anywhere. I am here, and I am yours if you will have me." "I want to believe that," Magnolia said, her voice trembling. "I want to believe that I can have this, have you, have a real life instead of just survival, but I am scared, Zachary. I am terrified that I will wake up and find out this was all a dream, or that something will happen to take it away from me." "Then let me prove it to you," Zachary said. "Let me show you day by day that this is real, that my feelings are real, that you have finally found a place where you are wanted and loved and accepted exactly as you are." Magnolia nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and Zachary kissed her again, softer this time, a seal of the promise they had made to each other. The sound of boots on the steps made them pull apart, and Jacob appeared from around the corner of the porch. He stopped short when he saw them, his eyes going from his brother to Magnolia and back again. For a moment, his expression was unreadable, and Magnolia felt a flicker of fear. Would Jacob disapprove? Would he convince Zachary that this was a mistake? Then Jacob smiled, a rare and genuine smile that made him look years younger. "About time," was all he said before heading inside, but the approval in his voice was unmistakable. Zachary laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. "I think my brother just gave us his blessing. That's simple." Magnolia asked, still not quite able to believe it. "That's simple," Zachary confirmed. "Out here, we do not complicate things unnecessarily. You love me, I love you, Jacob approves, and that is all that matters." The weeks that followed were the happiest of Magnolia's life. She continued her work as housekeeper, but now there was a lightness to her days, a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. Zachary courted her properly, taking her on rides around the ranch in the evenings, showing her all the places he loved. sharing his dreams and plans for the future with an openness that still amazed her. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and hopes. Zachary told her about growing up poor in Missouri, about watching his father drink himself to death, and his mother leave without looking back when he was 12, and Jacob was 10. He told her about the years of hard labor on the railroad, saving every penny, dreaming of owning land of his own. He told her about the day he and Jacob had found this valley, had known instantly that this was home, had poured all their savings and sweat and blood into making the ranch a reality. Magnolia told him about her childhood in San Francisco, about a father who had died when she was young and a mother who had never recovered from the loss, who had become bitter and critical, expecting her daughter to somehow fill the void left by her husband's death. She told him about the loneliness of growing up in a house full of disapproval, about the desperation that had made her accept Robert Thorne's proposal despite her misgivings, about the years of moving from place to place, always an outsider, always temporary. "You are not temporary here," Zachary told her one evening as they sat by the creek that ran through the property. "You are permanent, Magnolia. You are home." The word home resonated in her heart like a bell. She had never had a home, not really, but looking at Zachary's face in the fading light, seeing the love and certainty in his eyes, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found one at last. Jacob continued to warm to her, becoming more talkative, and even occasionally joining in the evening conversations on the porch. He told her stories about Zachary as a boy, embarrassing tales that made his brother groan and Magnolia laugh until her sides ached. The ranch hands treated her with respect and even affection, grateful for the good meals and clean quarters, for the way she remembered their birthdays and mended their shirts without being asked. 2 months after her arrival, on a Sunday afternoon when the work was light and the weather was perfect, Zachary took Magnolia into Ruby City. They rode together in the wagon, sitting close on the bench seat, his arm around her shoulders in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "I want people to see us together," he had said when she questioned the wisdom of being so public with their affection. "I want everyone in Ruby City to know that you are mine and I am yours. I am not ashamed or worried about what anyone thinks, and I do not want you to be either." They made quite a picture as they drove down the main street, the tall, handsome rancher and the auburn-haired woman who had arrived alone and uncertain just 2 months earlier. People stared, and Magnolia felt the old familiar fear start to rise in her chest. But then Zachary squeezed her shoulder, and she looked up to see him smiling down at her with such open adoration that she could not help but smile back. They stopped at the general store to pick up supplies, and Zachary insisted on buying her a new dress, a beautiful green calico that brought out the color of her eyes. "You deserve pretty things," he said when she protested the expense. "You deserve to have more than just work dresses and aprons." At the hotel, the same thin woman who had greeted Magnolia on her arrival looked at them with shrewd eyes. "Heard you two were courting," she said bluntly. "About time someone put a smile on your face, Zachary Everhart. You work too hard." "Yes, madam," Zachary agreed cheerfully. "But I am a lucky man, and I do not take that for granted." They had lunch at the small restaurant, and several people stopped by their table to say hello, to welcome Magnolia properly to the community, to express their approval of the match. She was overwhelmed by the friendliness, by the genuine warmth of people she had expected to judge and reject her. On the ride back to the ranch, she said as much to Zachary, who nodded thoughtfully. "I told you Ruby City judges people by their actions, not their history. You have been working at the ranch for 2 months. You have been treating people with kindness and respect, and word has spread that you are a good woman. That is what matters here. What about my past? Does no one know, or do they simply not care?" Zachary was silent for a moment, and Magnolia felt a flicker of anxiety. Then he sighed and said, "Some people know parts of it. This is a small community and gossip travels. But here is the thing, Magnolia. Everyone in Ruby City has a story. Everyone came here from somewhere else, running from something or toward something. The blacksmith used to be a prize fighter who killed a man in the ring and came west to escape the guilt. The banker embezzled money back in Boston and reinvented himself here. The preacher lost his faith after his family died of cholera and found it again in these mountains." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "We are all broken people trying to build something better. That is what the West is, a chance to start over, to become more than our worst moments. You fit right in, Magnolia. You are one of us." She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling tears prick at her eyes for what felt like the 100th time since meeting this man who had given her back her hope. "I love you, Zachary Everhart. I love you too, Magnolia Thorne. And I have a question to ask you." She sat up, looking at him in surprise. "What question?" Zachary pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road and turned to face her fully. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, which he opened to reveal a simple gold band with a small but beautiful sapphire set in it. "Magnolia, I know it has only been 2 months, and I know that some people would say we are rushing things. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of this. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to build this ranch with you, raise children with you, grow old with you. Will you marry me?" Magnolia stared at the ring, then at his face, seeing the hope and love and slight nervousness in his expression. A part of her wanted to be cautious, to take more time, to make sure this was real. But a larger part of her, the part that had been lonely and afraid for so long, knew that this was her chance at happiness, and she would be a fool to let fear hold her back. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, I will marry you, Zachary. I will be proud and honored to be your wife." Zachary's face split into a grin so wide it must have hurt, and he slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that left them both breathless. "We are getting married," he said, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are getting married," Magnolia agreed, laughing with pure joy. They were wed a month later, on a clear October day when the aspens were turning gold and the air had the crisp bite of approaching winter. The ceremony took place at the small church in Ruby City, with Jacob standing as best man and the hotel proprietor's wife acting as Magnolia's matron of honor. Half the town turned out for the wedding, and the celebration afterward at the ranch went long into the night, with music and dancing and more food than Magnolia had ever seen in one place. Through it all, Zachary never left her side, his hand always finding hers, his eyes constantly seeking her out in the crowd. He looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, and Magnolia felt beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with her appearance and everything to do with being truly seen and loved. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, with Zachary showing infinite patience and care, making sure she felt safe and cherished. He had known, without her having to explain, that her experiences with her first husband had left scars, and he was determined to replace those painful memories with new ones full of love and gentleness. "I love you," he whispered against her skin as they lay tangled together in the darkness of their room, now truly their room, shared without reservation or fear. "I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you know how much." "I know," Magnolia whispered back, running her fingers through his dark hair. I know because I feel the same way about you. You saved me, Zachary. You gave me back my life." "No," Zachary said, kissing her softly. "You saved yourself. You were the one who was brave enough to leave, strong enough to keep going, determined enough to not give up. I just had the incredible good fortune to be here when you arrived." As winter settled over the Awahi Mountains, life on the ranch took on a different rhythm. The work was harder in some ways, with cattle to feed and water despite the snow, with pipes freezing and needing to be thawed, with the constant battle to keep buildings and animals warm and dry. But it was also quieter, more intimate, with long evenings spent by the fire and lazy Sunday mornings in bed. Magnolia had never been happier. She loved being Zachary's wife, loved the way he reached for her in the night, loved the sound of his laughter and the strength of his arms around her. She loved the ranch, loved the way spring would explode across the valley with wildflowers and newborn calves, loved the fierce summer heat and the brilliant fall colors and the pristine winter snow. She loved the life they were building together, the small traditions they established, like Sunday dinners with Jacob and the ranch hands, like evening rides to check on the cattle, like the way Zachary always brought her wildflowers when he found them blooming on the range. In the spring of 1879, Magnolia discovered she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around despite her laughing protests, then set her down gently and knelt before her, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said solemnly. "This is your father. I want you to know that you are already the most loved child in Idaho Territory, and your mother and I cannot wait to meet you." Magnolia ran her fingers through his hair, overcome with emotion. "We are going to be parents." "We are going to be parents," Zachary agreed, looking up at her with wonder in his eyes. "And you are going to be an amazing mother." "I hope so," Magnolia said softly. "I hope I can be better than my own mother, give our child the love and acceptance I never had." Zachary stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "You will be. I know you will be because you have so much love inside you, love that you were never allowed to give freely before. Our child is going to grow up knowing they are wanted, knowing they are safe, knowing they have parents who will support them no matter what." The pregnancy was easier than Magnolia had feared, though she did suffer from morning sickness in the early months that left her pale and exhausted. Zachary was attentive to the point of being overprotective, trying to take over her chores and insisting she rest more. It took Jacob's intervention, telling his brother bluntly that Magnolia was pregnant, not dying, before Zachary backed off enough to let her continue her normal activities. In December of 1879, during a snowstorm that blanketed the ranch in white, Magnolia went into labor. Zachary rode through the storm to fetch the doctor from Ruby City, returning with both the doctor and the hotel proprietor's wife, who had experience as a midwife. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Zachary refused to leave her side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement even when she screamed at him that this was all his fault. He took her anger and fear and pain without flinching, his love and support never wavering. When their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, Zachary cried too, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny, perfect human they had created together. "He is beautiful," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Magnolia, he is perfect." They named him Matthew after Magnolia's father, and he quickly became the center of their universe. Zachary was a devoted father, taking on nighttime feedings with bottles of expressed milk so Magnolia could rest, changing diapers without complaint, carrying the baby around the ranch and explaining everything to him in a serious tone that made Magnolia laugh. Jacob proved to be a doting uncle, carving toys for his nephew and spending hours rocking him to sleep when he was fussy. The ranch hands treated Matthew like a mascot, competing to see who could make him smile, bringing him small gifts they had made or found. As Matthew grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Zachary and Jacob expanded the herd, bought more land, and hired additional hands. The house was enlarged to accommodate their growing family, with a proper nursery added and plans drawn up for more bedrooms in anticipation of future children. Magnolia divided her time between running the household, caring for Matthew, and helping with the ranch accounts. She discovered she had a head for numbers and business, and Zachary came to rely on her insights and advice. They were true partners in every sense of the word, building their life together through mutual respect, hard work, and unwavering love. In the summer of 1881, their daughter was born, a tiny girl with Zachary's gray eyes and Magnolia's auburn hair. They named her Sarah, and she proved to be every bit as spirited as her brother was serious. The house filled with the sounds of children's laughter, with the chaos of toys and books and clothes scattered everywhere, with the beautiful mess of a life fully lived. Through it all, Zachary never let Magnolia forget that she was loved, that she was valued not just as a mother and housekeeper but as a woman, a partner, a person in her own right. He still brought her wildflowers, still sought out her company in quiet moments, still looked at her with the same intensity and adoration he had shown that first evening on the porch when he had told her she had finally found acceptance. And Magnolia, who had arrived in Ruby City expecting rejection again, who had spent so many years running and hiding and surviving, finally understood what it meant to truly live. She had found more than acceptance with Zachary Everhart. She had found love, partnership, family, and home. She had found the place where she belonged, and she had found herself in the process. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachary took her back to the spot on the road where he had proposed, and they stood together watching the sun set over the mountains they had come to love. Matthew and Sarah were at home with Jacob, giving them a rare evening alone. "Do you remember that day you arrived in Ruby City?" Zachary asked, his arm around her shoulders. "I remember expecting to be rejected again," Magnolia said softly. "I remember being so tired, so convinced that this place would be no different from all the others. And then I told you that you had finally found acceptance here." "You did," Magnolia agreed, leaning into his warmth. "And you were right, Zachary. I did find acceptance, but I found so much more than that. I found love, real love, the kind I did not think existed. I found a home, a family, a purpose. I found you, and that changed everything." Zachary turned her to face him, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that still made her heart flutter after all these years. "You changed everything for me too. Before you came, I was just existing, working, building something but not knowing what it was all for. You gave my life meaning, Magnolia. You and Matthew and Sarah, you are the reason I work so hard, the reason I want to build something that will last. You are my heart, my home, my everything." He kissed her as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. And Magnolia kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude into that kiss, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Matthew grew tall and strong like his father, with a quiet competence that made him a natural with horses and cattle. Sarah was fierce and curious, always asking questions, always pushing boundaries, keeping her parents on their toes. In 1883, another son was born, named Jacob after his uncle. And in 1885, twin girls arrived, named Emma and Elizabeth. The house was full to bursting with children and noise and life, and Magnolia loved every chaotic moment of it. She had gone from being a woman alone, carrying nothing but a single carpetbag and a lifetime of rejection, to being the matriarch of a thriving family and a respected member of her community. She taught Sunday school at the church, organized community events, and was known throughout Ruby City as someone who could be counted on for help in times of trouble. But more than any of that, she was happy. Deeply, genuinely, unreservedly happy in a way she had never imagined possible. Every morning, she woke up next to the man she loved, in a house filled with children's laughter, on land that would belong to their family for generations to come. Every evening she sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the mountains, secure in the knowledge that she was loved, accepted, and valued exactly as she was. Zachary kept his promise to spend the rest of his life proving his love to her. He was there for every triumph and every setback, every joy and every sorrow. When her mother passed away in San Francisco and Magnolia grieved for the relationship they had never had, Zachary held her and let her cry. When Matthew had his first bad riding accident, and they sat up all night waiting to see if he would wake, Zachary's hand never left hers. When Sarah announced at 15 that she wanted to go to college back east, something unheard of for a ranch girl, Zachary supported the decision even though it broke his heart to think of her being so far away. He aged gracefully, the gray at his temples only making him more distinguished, the lines around his eyes a testament to years of laughter and hard work. He never lost the strength that had first attracted Magnolia, but he gained a gentleness, a patience that came from being truly happy. Jacob never married, claiming that one successful marriage in the family was miracle enough, and he did not want to tempt fate. But he was devoted to his nieces and nephews, teaching them to ride, to rope, to raid the land and the animals. He became the ranch's steady presence, the one constant as the world changed around them. By 1895, when Magnolia was 42 and Zachary was 47, the ranch had become one of the most successful operations in Idaho. Their children were growing into fine adults, with Matthew taking on more and more of the day-to-day management, Sarah writing home from Boston about her studies, and the younger three still in school but already showing signs of the people they would become. On a warm summer evening, Magnolia and Zachary once again found themselves alone on the porch, a rare occurrence now that the house was so full of life. They sat in the rocking chairs that had become their evening refuge, hands clasped between them, watching the stars come out one by one. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Zachary asked. "When you stepped off the stagecoach expecting rejection?" Magnolia smiled, squeezing his hand. "I think about it often, actually. I think about how scared I was, how certain I was that this would be just another disappointment. And then I think about everything that happened after, all the blessings I could never have imagined, and I am amazed at how wrong I was." "You were not wrong," Zachary said gently. "You had every reason to expect rejection based on your experiences. What you did not know, what you could not have known, was that you were finally in the right place with the right people. Sometimes all we need is to find where we belong, and everything else falls into place." "I belong here," Magnolia said, not as a question but as a statement of fact. "With you, with our children on this land in this life. I have never been more certain of anything. And I belong with you," Zachary replied, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it softly. "You are my heart, Magnolia. You always have been, From that first moment I saw you in the hotel lobby, looking so fierce and scared and beautiful. I knew then that you were going to change my life, and I was right." They sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened around them, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and true from the ashes of their broken pasts. The ranch spread out before them in the darkness, a testament to their hard work and determination. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and wanted. And above them, the stars wheeled through the sky, ancient and eternal, bearing witness to the love story that had begun with a woman arriving expecting rejection and a cowboy who had offered acceptance instead. In the end, that was what love was, Magnolia thought. It was not grand gestures or passionate declarations, though those had their place. Real love was acceptance, the kind that saw all your flaws and fears and failures and said, "You belong here, you are wanted, you are enough." Zachary had given her that gift 17 years ago, and every day since then he had renewed it with his actions, his words, his unwavering presence by her side. And she had given him the same gift in return, accepting his rough edges and his occasional stubbornness, his workaholic tendencies and his overprotective streaks, loving him not despite these things, but because they were part of who he was. They had built a life together that was rich and full and meaningful, a life that had started with the simple words, "You have finally found acceptance here." And those words had proven true in ways neither of them could have imagined, opening the door to a future filled with love, family, purpose, and joy. As they rose from their chairs and headed inside to bed, their hands still clasped, Magnolia looked back one last time at the ranch spread out in the moonlight. This was home. This was where she belonged. This was where her story, which had begun in pain and fear and loneliness, had transformed into something beautiful. She had arrived expecting rejection again, but instead she had found acceptance, love, and a happiness that would last the rest of her days. And that, she thought as Zachary pulled her close and kissed her temple, was the greatest gift of all. Years continued to roll by like the changing seasons, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Matthew married a schoolteacher from Boise in 1898, bringing another generation to the ranch. Their first child, a boy named Zachary after his grandfather, arrived in 1899, and Magnolia discovered the unique joy of being a grandmother. Holding that tiny baby, seeing her son become a father, watching Zachary interact with his grandson with the same tenderness he had shown their own children, filled her heart to overflowing. Sarah returned from Boston in 1900 with a degree in literature and a burning desire to open a school in Ruby City. Zachary helped her secure a building, and within a year, she had established a reputation as an excellent teacher, educating the children of miners and ranchers with equal dedication. She eventually married one of the town's doctors, a kind man who appreciated her intelligence and spirit. Young Jacob followed in his uncle's footsteps, becoming the ranch's livestock expert, with an almost uncanny ability to understand and work with animals. The twins, Emma and Elizabeth, proved to be as different as night and day despite their identical appearance. Emma had her mother's gift for organization and numbers, while Elizabeth inherited her father's love of the land and physical work. Through it all, Magnolia and Zachary remained the steady center around which everything revolved. They were the elders now, the ones whose advice was sought, whose approval mattered, whose love story had become legend in Ruby City. People talked about how Zachary Everhart had married a woman with a past and made her his queen. They talked about how Magnolia Thorne Everhart had transformed from a frightened, lonely woman into the backbone of one of the most successful ranches in Idaho. They talked about a love that had endured hardship and triumph, that had produced 5 children and numerous grandchildren, that showed no signs of fading even as the years advanced. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904, the entire town of Ruby City threw them a celebration. The church was decorated with wildflowers and ribbons, and the party afterward lasted well into the night. Magnolia wore a beautiful blue dress that Zachary had commissioned from a dressmaker in Boise, and she felt like a queen as he led her in dance after dance, his eyes never leaving her face. 25 years, he murmured as they swayed to the music. It feels like yesterday and forever all at once. I know what you mean, Magnolia replied, resting her head on his shoulder. I can still remember the fear I felt when I arrived, the certainty that I would be rejected again. And then I remember your face when you told me I had found acceptance here, and everything that has happened since then seems like a beautiful dream. It is not a dream, Zachary said firmly. It is real, Magnolia. Our love is real, our family is real, our life together is real. And I would not change a single moment of it. Not even the hard times, because they all led us here, to this moment, to this life we have built together. As the new century progressed, bringing with it automobiles and electricity and other modern conveniences, the ranch adapted while maintaining its essential character. Zachary was hesitant about some changes, but Magnolia encouraged him to embrace progress where it made sense. They installed a telephone line, purchased a truck to supplement the wagons, and even got electricity run to the main house in 1908. But some things never changed. The porch remained their favorite place to sit in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains they had come to love. The Sunday dinners continued, now with multiple generations gathered around a table that had been extended numerous times to accommodate everyone. The love between Zachary and Magnolia remained as strong as ever, a living testament to the power of acceptance, trust, and commitment. In 1912, when Magnolia was 59 and Zachary was 64, they took a trip to San Francisco, their first real vacation in over 30 years. They stayed in a fancy hotel, saw all the sights, and Magnolia was able to visit her mother's grave and make peace with the past in a way she had never been able to do before. I forgive her, she told Zachary as they stood in the cemetery. I understand now, being a mother myself, how hard it must have been for her to lose the love of her life and be left to raise a daughter alone. She did the best she could with what she had, and I cannot ask for more than that. Zachary put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. You are a remarkable woman, Magnolia Everhart. Your capacity for forgiveness and understanding never ceases to amaze me. They returned to the ranch renewed and refreshed, ready to continue the life they had built. But life has a way of reminding us that nothing lasts forever, and in the winter of 1915, Jacob caught pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of the doctor and the devoted nursing of his family, he passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Zachary and Magnolia at his bedside. Zachary grieved deeply for his brother, his best friend, the man who had stood by him through everything. Magnolia held him as he cried, gave him space when he needed it, and gently pulled him back to life when the grief threatened to overwhelm him. He loved this place, Zachary said one evening as they sat on the porch, looking out at the ranch that had been built with Jacob's help. He loved you, loved the children, loved the life we all built together. And we loved him, Magnolia replied softly. He was a good man, Zachary. He helped make me feel welcome when I was so scared and alone. He was patient with me when I did not deserve patience, and he became one of my dearest friends. We will never forget him, and his legacy lives on in this ranch, in our children, in everything we have accomplished." They named the next grandson Jacob, ensuring that the name would continue in the family. And they established a scholarship in Jacob's name for students from Ruby City who wanted to pursue agricultural studies, a fitting tribute to a man who had loved the land and understood it so well. As the years advanced and they moved into their 70s, Zachary and Magnolia gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, trusting Matthew and young Jacob to handle things while they enjoyed a well-earned semi-retirement. They spent their days reading, gardening, playing with their numerous grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, Zachary stood up to make a toast. His hair was white now, and his face was lined with age, but his eyes were still that striking storm gray, and they still looked at Magnolia with the same love and adoration they had held 40 years earlier. 40 years ago, I met a woman at the hotel in Ruby City, he began, his voice still strong despite his age. She was carrying a single bag and a lifetime of hurt, expecting to be rejected yet again by a world that had been cruel to her. I took one look at her, and I knew my life was about to change. He turned to face Magnolia directly, taking her hands in his. "I told you that day that you had finally found acceptance here, and I meant it. But what I did not know then, what I could not have known, was that you were not just finding acceptance. You were finding home, finding family, finding the place where you belonged. And in the process, you gave me the same gifts. You made this house a home. You gave me a family I never dared dream of having. You showed me what real love looks like, the kind that endures through everything." Tears streamed down Magnolia's face as he continued, his own eyes wet. "You arrived expecting rejection, my love, but what you found was so much more than acceptance. You found a life, a purpose, a legacy. You found me and I found you, and together we built something that will last long after we are gone. Our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, they are all testament to the love we share. This ranch, thriving and successful, is a testament to our partnership. And every day I wake up next to you is a testament to the fact that true love exists, that it is worth fighting for, and that it can transform everything." He raised his glass, and everyone in the room followed suit. "To my wife, Magnolia. You have finally found acceptance here, and in return, you have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. I love you more today than I did 40 years ago, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." To Magnolia and Zachary. The room chorused, and the sound of glasses clinking filled the air. Magnolia could not speak through her tears, but she did not need to. She rose from her chair and kissed her husband, pouring 40 years of love and gratitude into that kiss, and everyone in the room cheered and clapped, celebrating a love story that had inspired them all. As the party continued around them, Magnolia and Zachary slipped away to their porch, their refuge, their place of peace. They sat in their rocking chairs, hands clasped, watching the stars come out. 40 years, Magnolia said softly. "It has gone by so fast." "And yet we have packed a lifetime into every year," Zachary replied. "I have no regrets, Magnolia, not a single one." "Neither do I," she said, and it was true. Every hardship she had endured before meeting Zachary had led her to this moment, to this man, to this life. She would not change any of it, because changing even one thing might have meant never finding him. "Do you remember what I told you that very first evening?" Zachary asked. "You said that everyone deserves more than just work, that everyone deserves to have a life, to be happy, to find a place where they belong. And you said happiness was for other people, that you were content with survival." Magnolia laughed softly. I was so wrong. You showed me what happiness looks like, Zachary. You gave me a life worth living, not just surviving. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything, Zachary corrected gently. This was never one-sided, Magnolia. You saved me as much as I saved you. Before you came, I was just a man building an empire with no real understanding of why. You gave me purpose. You made me want to be better, to do more, to create something lasting. You taught me what it means to truly love someone, to be a partner in every sense of the word. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had spent so many years together that words were often unnecessary. They could communicate in looks, in touches, in the simple presence of being together. The years that followed were peaceful and golden. Zachary's health remained good well into his 70s, though he moved slower and tired more easily. Magnolia developed arthritis in her hands, making sewing and some household tasks difficult, but she adapted with her characteristic determination. They watched their family continue to grow and thrive. Matthew's oldest son took over running the ranch when Matthew decided to semi-retire himself. Sarah's school had become an institution in Ruby City, educating hundreds of children over the years. Young Jacob married and had children of his own. Emma became a successful businesswoman, opening a general store in town. Elizabeth married a neighboring rancher and raised her family on the adjacent property. Through it all, Magnolia and Zachary remained at the center, the heart of the family, the example everyone looked to when they wondered what true love looked like. Their story was told and retold, passed down through the generations, becoming part of the family's identity. On a warm spring morning in 1923, Magnolia woke to find Zachary watching her with a tender expression. They were 70 and 76 years old, respectively, and every day together felt like both a gift and a confirmation of the life they had built. "Good morning, my love," he said softly, reaching out to brush a strand of white hair from her face. "Good morning," she replied, snuggling closer to him. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Zachary said. "I am thinking about that day 44 years ago when I walked into the hotel and saw you sitting there, so fierce and scared and beautiful. I am thinking about every day since then, every moment we have shared, every challenge we have overcome together. And I am thinking that I would do it all again in a heartbeat, exactly the same way, because it led me to you." Magnolia felt tears spring to her eyes. Even after all these years, his words still had the power to move her. "I love you, Zachary Everhart. I have loved you from the moment you told me I had found acceptance here, and I will love you for whatever time we have left and beyond. I love you too, Magnolia Everhart, more than life itself." They rose slowly, helping each other dress and make their way downstairs. The house was quiet, as most of their children and grandchildren had their own homes now, but it still felt full of life, full of memories, full of the love that had sustained them through so many years. After breakfast, they took their customary walk around the ranch, moving slowly but steadily, taking in the sights and sounds of the place they had built together. The cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. The horses whinnied in their corrals. The buildings stood strong and well-maintained. Everything bore the mark of their hard work and dedication. "It is beautiful," Magnolia said, as she had said so many times before. "It is home," Zachary replied, as he always did. They made their way to the creek, to the spot where Zachary had proposed all those years ago, and stood together watching the water flow past, clear and cold from the mountain snowmelt. This spot had become sacred to them, a place they returned to again and again to remember, to reconnect, to celebrate the journey they had taken together. "You have any regrets?" Magnolia asked suddenly. It was a question she had asked before, but she found herself wanting to hear his answer again. Zachary thought for a moment, then shook his head decisively. Not a single one. Every choice I made, every path I took, led me to you and to this life. How could I regret any of that? I feel the same way, Magnolia said. Even the hard parts, the painful parts, they all had a purpose. They made me who I am and they brought me to you. I would not trade this life for anything. Zachary pulled her close, and they stood there by the creek, two people who had found each other in the wilderness and built something lasting and true. The sun shone warm on their faces, the water sang its eternal song, and the mountains stood guard over the valley they had claimed as their own. As they made their way back to the house, Magnolia thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Ruby City. That frightened, damaged woman who expected rejection, who believed she was not worthy of love or happiness, who thought survival was the best she could hope for. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from another life entirely. Zachary had been right all those years ago. She had finally found acceptance in Ruby City, on the Everhart ranch in his arms. But more than that, she had found herself. She had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed, talents she had never been allowed to develop, a capacity for love and joy that had been buried under years of hurt and fear. She had learned that her past did not define her, that mistakes and bad choices did not make her unworthy, that everyone deserved a second chance, a fresh start, a place to call home. She had learned that love was not about perfection, but about acceptance, not about grand gestures, but about daily choice and commitment, not about losing yourself, but about finding someone who helped you become your best self. And she had learned all of this from Zachary, from his patient example, from his unwavering love, from his simple but profound belief that she was worthy of happiness. He had given her the greatest gift anyone could give, the freedom to be herself, completely and without reservation. As the sun set that evening and they took their places on the porch, rocking gently and watching the day end, Magnolia felt a deep sense of peace. She had lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with meaning and purpose. She had loved and been loved in return. She had raised children who were good people, who were making their own marks on the world. She had been part of building something that would last for generations. She arrived expecting rejection again, but instead, she had found everything she never knew she needed. And that, she thought as Zachary's hand found hers in the gathering darkness, was the greatest story of all. The final years of their lives together were marked by contentment and gratitude. They celebrated their 45th, then their 46th, then their 47th wedding anniversaries, each one a milestone that they were grateful to reach together. On a quiet morning in the late summer of 1926, Zachary passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Magnolia beside him as she had been for 47 years. He was 83 years old, and he had lived a life full of purpose, love, and accomplishment. His final words the night before had been, "I love you, Magnolia, always and forever." Magnolia grieved deeply for the loss of her partner, her soulmate, the man who had changed everything. But even in her grief, she found comfort in the life they had built together, in the family that surrounded her, in the knowledge that their love story had been real and true and lasting. She lived for 3 more years, remaining on the ranch she loved, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who adored her. She spent her days telling stories about Zachary, about the early days of the ranch, about the love that had sustained them through so many years. She wanted to make sure that future generations understood what they had built, and why it mattered. On a spring morning in 1929, with wildflowers blooming across the valley and the mountains standing eternal in the distance. Magnolia Thorne Everhart passed away peacefully in her sleep, ready to join the love of her life. She was 76 years old, and she left behind a legacy of love, courage, and perseverance that would inspire her family for generations to come. She was buried next to Zachary on a hill overlooking the ranch, in a spot they had chosen together years before. The entire town of Ruby City turned out for the funeral, testament to the impact she had made on the community. The pastor spoke about her courage, her kindness, her unwavering commitment to family and faith. But it was Matthew, her oldest son, who gave the eulogy that captured who she truly was. "My mother arrived in Ruby City 51 years ago carrying a single bag and a lifetime of hurt," he began, his voice strong despite his tears. "She expected to be rejected again, as she had been so many times before, but my father looked at her and saw something different. He saw a survivor, a fighter, a woman worthy of love and acceptance." He paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. Together, they built something remarkable, not just this ranch, though it stands as testament to their hard work and dedication. Not just this family, though we are all proof of their love and commitment. They built a life based on acceptance, on seeing the best in people, on believing that everyone deserves a second chance. "My mother taught us that our past does not define us, that we can overcome anything with courage and determination. That love is the most powerful force in the world. My father showed us that true strength comes from kindness, that real success is measured in the people you love and who love you in return, that a life well lived is one spent in service to others." Together, they created a legacy that will last long after all of us are gone. Every time we gather for Sunday dinner, every time we help a neighbor in need, every time we choose love over fear, acceptance over judgment, kindness over cruelty, we are honoring their memory and continuing their work. He smiled through his tears. "My mother used to tell me about the day she arrived in Ruby City, how certain she was that she would be rejected again. She said my father looked at her and said, 'You have finally found acceptance here,' and he was right. She did find acceptance, but more than that, she found home. She found family. She found love. She found herself. And in finding herself, she helped all of us find the best parts of ourselves. That is her legacy, and it is one we will carry forward with pride and gratitude." The words hung in the air as the sun shone down on the gathering, as if blessing the memory of two people who had lived and loved so well. And as Magnolia was laid to rest beside her beloved Zachary, the wind whispered through the valley carrying the scent of wildflowers, and it seemed to say what everyone already knew. This was a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of acceptance, and a reminder that sometimes, when you stop expecting rejection and start believing in the possibility of love, you find everything you never knew you needed. The ranch continued to thrive under Matthew's leadership, and eventually passed to his son, young Zachary, ensuring that the Everhart name would remain connected to the land for generations to come. The house on the hill became a gathering place for family reunions, where descendants of Magnolia and Zachary would come from all over the country to reconnect with their roots and hear the stories of the two people who had started it all. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Awahi Mountains and the valley was bathed in golden light, it was easy to imagine two figures sitting on that porch, hands clasped, watching the day end together. A woman who had arrived expecting rejection, and a cowboy who had offered acceptance instead. Two people who had found each other in the wilderness and built a love that would echo through the generations. A reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simple words, "You have finally found acceptance here."